The laboratory hummed with anxious energy as Professor Marcus Reed paced the polished floor. Today marked humanity's first official scientific exchange with the Celestials, a species that had been observing Earth from afar for centuries before finally making contact last year. "Professor, the arrival is imminent," his assistant Eliza noted, checking the specialized communication device they'd been provided. "Are you certain about this arrangement? Hosting an alien researcher seems revolutionary," Marcus finished, adjusting his glasses. At 42, with salt and pepper hair and perpetually ink-stained fingers, he hadn't expected to become humanity's ambassador to an advanced alien civilization. His specialty in cognitive neuroscience had apparently made him the perfect candidate to guide their visitor. The air in the center of the room shimmered, molecules rearranging themselves into a humanoid form. The light settled, revealing a tall figure with iridescent skin that shifted between pale blue and silver. Her features were almost human, 2 arms, 2 legs, a face with recognizable features, yet unmistakably alien in their perfect symmetry. "Greetings," the being said, her voice melodic yet oddly flat. "I am designated researcher Lyra, Xenoanthropology Division, Celestial Science Academy." Marcus stepped forward, remembering not to offer his hand as they'd been briefed that Celestials avoided physical contact. "Welcome to Earth, Researcher Lyra. I'm Professor Marcus Reed." Lyra's large, pupilless eyes, a swirl of violet and indigo, studied him intently. "You exhibit elevated heart rate, dilated pupils, and increased perspiration. Anxiety response?" Marcus laughed nervously. "Excitement, actually. It's not every day we meet someone from another world." "Interesting distinction," Lyra noted, producing a small device that glowed as she spoke into it. "Subject differentiates between anxiety and excitement despite identical physiological markers." "I'm not a subject," Marcus said gently. "I'm your colleague and guide." Lyra tilted her head. "Correction accepted. The purpose of my 3-month assignment is to study human emotional responses, which my species has evolved beyond. We believe understanding your emotional processing may provide insights into pre-rational evolutionary stages." Eliza frowned at the implied insult, but Marcus remained diplomatic. "Or perhaps emotions serve functions your evolution took in a different direction." "An unsubstantiated hypothesis," Lyra replied, but a flicker of something, curiosity, crossed her face. "My superiors believe emotions are inefficient remnants of primitive survival mechanisms." "Then why study them at all?" Marcus challenged. "Knowledge has inherent value," Lyra stated. "And anomalies interest us. Your species has achieved space travel, complex mathematics, and artistic expression while remaining emotionally driven. This contradicts our developmental models." As Marcus showed Lyra to her specially prepared quarters, he explained the research protocol they developed together. She would observe various human interactions, conduct interviews, and participate in controlled social situations. "Tomorrow we'll begin with simple everyday experiences," Marcus explained. "A walk through the botanical gardens, perhaps lunch at a cafe." "I do not require nutrient consumption in your presence," Lyra noted. "It's not about nutrition. It's about the social experience," Marcus explained. "Sharing food is one of humanity's oldest bonding rituals." "Bonding," Lyra repeated, testing the word. "A chemical emotional process that serves social cohesion." "Among other things," Marcus replied with a small smile. As he left her to settle in, Lyra activated her communication link to the celestial mothership. "Initial contact established," she reported. "The human exhibits unexpected complexity. Current emotional classification systems may be inadequate. Request permission to expand research parameters." After a pause, her superior's voice replied, "Permission granted, Researcher Lyra. But remember our primary directive, observe only. You must remain unaffected. Emotional contamination would compromise your findings and necessitate immediate extraction." Understood, Lyra responded confidently. No risk of contamination exists. I am a scientist first and foremost. As she deactivated the link, Lyra experienced a peculiar sensation, a slight acceleration of her triple heartbeat as she contemplated tomorrow's research activities with the human professor. Merely anticipation for data collection, she assured herself. Nothing more. The botanical gardens bloomed with colors Lyra had never encountered, despite her extensive studies of Earth's flora. She paused before a cluster of orchids, their petals delicate and vibrant against the controlled environment of the greenhouse. These specimens appear to serve no practical function, she observed, recording the scene with her ocular implant. Yet humans allocate significant resources to their cultivation. Marcus watched her with amusement. Beauty doesn't need a function, Lyra. The emotional response these flowers evoke is their purpose. Elaborate on this beauty concept, Lyra requested, moving closer to the flowers. It's subjective, a pleasure response triggered by certain visual stimuli. Different for everyone. Marcus gently touched a petal. These orchids remind me of my mother's garden when I was a child. That memory adds to their beauty for me. Lyra tried to process this. You assign value based on personal association rather than objective criteria. Exactly. That's why emotions are so powerful, they're personal. As they continued through the gardens, Lyra noticed an unfamiliar sensation when Marcus smiled or when their hands accidentally brushed. A warmth spread through her chest cavity where her 3 hearts resided, most peculiar. Later, at a small cafe overlooking the city, Lyra observed couples holding hands, friends laughing over shared jokes, a child crying over spilled ice cream. Each interaction was meticulously recorded in her database. Your species invests considerable energy in courtship rituals, she noted, watching a young couple at a nearby table. The woman laughed at something her partner said, touching his arm affectionately. We call it dating, Marcus corrected, sipping his coffee. And yes, finding connection is important to us. Do you engage in these rituals, Professor? The question emerged before Lyra's logical filters could intervene. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Curious about my personal life, researcher Lyra? Is that part of your study? Comparative baseline data is essential, she replied quickly, though something in her tone lacked its usual clinical detachment. I was married once, Marcus admitted. It ended 5 years ago. Caroline was brilliant, another neuroscientist, but we wanted different things. She's in Singapore now, leading a research team. You sound, what is the term? Wistful. Regretful, maybe. Not about the ending, but that I couldn't be what she needed. Lyra's recording device blinked, indicating heightened neural activity in her own brain. This regret, it serves no purpose yet persists. Emotions don't always make logical sense, Lyra. That's what makes them challenging and interesting. Over the following weeks, their research expanded. They attended a concert where Lyra was overwhelmed by the collective emotional response to organized sound vibrations. They visited a hospital where joy and grief occupied the same building. They watched children play in a park, their unfiltered emotions fascinating to the alien scientist. Each night, Lyra transmitted data to her superiors, but increasingly found herself struggling to maintain scientific objectivity in her reports. The human capacity for emotional resilience was proving more complex than her species had theorized. Subject displays contradictory emotional states simultaneously, she recorded after watching Marcus laugh through tears when reminiscing about his late father. The supposed inefficiency of emotions appears to serve adaptive functions previously unrecognized. One evening, after witnessing a sunset that painted the sky in colors that made Lyra's breath catch unexpectedly, she found herself asking questions outside her research parameters. Do you ever feel incomplete, Marcus? He looked at her, surprised by the personal nature of the question. Everyone does sometimes. My species believes we achieved evolutionary perfection by eliminating emotional responses. Yet watching humans, I wonder what we sacrificed. Careful, Lyra, Marcus said softly. That sounds dangerously close to an emotional observation. Lyra's communication device chimed with an incoming message from her superiors. The sound startled her, and for the first time, she felt reluctant to answer. Is everything all right? Marcus asked, noticing her hesitation. My superiors require a progress report, she said, her voice unusually quiet. They are concerned about my research methods. What concerns could they have? Your work has been meticulous. Lyra looked at him, her iridescent skin dimming slightly. They believe I may be becoming too immersed in the subject matter. Isn't that the point of field research? Not for my species. Lyra stood, suddenly needing distance. We observe, analyze, but never participate. I must recalibrate my approach. As she walked away to respond to the message, Lyra felt a strange tightness in her chest, a sensation her training had never prepared her for. She diagnosed it as scientific curiosity, nothing more. Yet the flutter of her 3 hearts told a different story, one she wasn't yet ready to translate. The research facility's roof offered perfect solitude for Lyra's nightly contemplation. Earth's moon, so different from the 3 satellites orbiting her homeworld, cast silver light across her iridescent skin as she reviewed her most recent findings. Computer, analyze vital statistics over project duration, she commanded. The holographic display materialized before her. Analysis complete. Warning, significant deviation detected in researcher biometrics and in proximity to subject designation, Marcus Reed. Lyra frowned. Specify deviations. Triple heart synchronization patterns show unprecedented alignment. Neurochemical composition indicates activation of dormant receptor sites. Body temperature elevates by 1.2 degrees. Symptoms consistent with primitive bonding responses your species evolved beyond 5 millennia ago. Lyra dismissed the display with a wave of her hand. Impossible. She was experiencing nothing more than scientific fascination with human behavior. Yet she couldn't deny the physical responses that occurred whenever Marcus explained a poem, shared a memory, or simply looked at her with those remarkably expressive eyes. Researcher Lyra? Marcus's voice startled her. He emerged from the stairwell, carrying 2 steaming mugs. I thought you might be here. It's getting cold at night. He offered her a beverage, hot chocolate, he called it. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending an electric current through Lyra's nervous system that her analytical mind couldn't explain away. Thank you, she said, tasting the sweet liquid. This produces a pleasant sensation. That's the point, Marcus smiled, leaning against the railing beside her. Not everything needs to have a complex purpose. Sometimes feeling good is enough. My superiors would disagree. Lyra stared at the city lights below. They believe emotion leads to flawed decision-making. And what do you believe, Lyra? Marcus asked softly. Not as a researcher, but as yourself. The question penetrated defenses Lyra hadn't realized she'd constructed. I don't know anymore. My observations contradict everything I was taught about emotions. You use them not just despite rationality but alongside it. The poetry reading we attended, those words triggered physiological responses more powerful than any technology my civilization has developed. That's why we still write poetry after thousands of years, Marcus said. It helps us make sense of what logic can't explain. Like what I'm experiencing now. The words escaped before Lyra could contain them. Marcus turned to her, his expression cautious. And what are you experiencing, Lyra? She placed a hand over her chest, where her 3 hearts beat in troubling synchronicity. Physiological responses indicating attachment. Preoccupation with your opinions. Electrical impulses in neural pathways previously dormant. By my species standards, I am becoming dangerously compromised. By human standards, Marcus said gently, you might be falling in love. Love. The concept she'd been studying dispassionately for weeks. The emotion her civilization had deemed most irrational and therefore most dangerous. If that's true, Lyra whispered, then I have failed in my mission. Or succeeded beyond its parameters, Marcus suggested, carefully bridging the distance between them. You came to understand human emotions. Perhaps understanding requires experiencing. When his hand touched hers, Lyra didn't pull away. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel without analyzing, to experience without recording. That night, her transmission to the mothership was uncharacteristically brief. Her superiors noticed the omissions immediately. Researcher Lyra, your reports show concerning patterns, the cold voice of the chief science officer stated. Emotional contamination is suspected. Prepare for immediate extraction if your next report doesn't demonstrate proper scientific detachment. After disconnecting, Lyra didn't record her findings as usual. Instead, she replayed her memory of Marcus's touch, the warmth of his gaze, the concept he had introduced that transformed her understanding. Love, perhaps not a primitive evolutionary remnant, but the most advanced form of connection in the universe. The laboratory door slid open with unusual force. Lyra looked up from her workstation to find Marcus rushing toward her, his face displaying clear signs of distress. They're coming for you, he said breathlessly. I intercepted a transmission on the channel we established for diplomatic communications. Your superiors have declared you compromised and ordered your immediate extraction. Lyra's 3 hearts accelerated in unison. When? Tonight. A retrieval team has already entered Earth's atmosphere. Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled hair. What does extraction entail exactly? Forced retrieval, memory recalibration, and reassignment, Lyra explained, her voice unnaturally steady given the circumstances. My experiences here would be purged, classified as contaminated data. They would make you forget everything. Even. Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. Everything, Lyra confirmed. Especially emotional attachments. Those are considered the most dangerous form of contamination. Marcus paced the laboratory, mind racing. We need to leave. Now. I have a cabin in the mountains, remote, off the grid. We can hide there while figuring out our next steps. Lyra shook her head. Celestial tracking technology can locate me anywhere on this planet. And they wouldn't hesitate to use force against anyone interfering with extraction protocols. So you're just going to surrender? Marcus demanded. Let them erase everything you've discovered, everything you've become. Lyra's skin pulsed with colors reflecting her internal conflict. What I've become violates everything my civilization stands for, Marcus. I was sent to study emotions, not experience them. Perhaps they're right to recall me. Do you believe that? Marcus stepped closer, his intensity radiating like heat. After everything you've learned about human emotion, do you still think it's a primitive evolutionary flaw? Lyra's scientific training battled with her newfound emotional awareness. No, she finally admitted. What I've experienced with you has expanded my consciousness, not diminished it. The connection between us has revealed pathways of understanding my species abandoned millennia ago. Then fight for it, Marcus urged. Not just for us, but for what your research truly reveals. Decision crystallized within Lyra. She activated her communication device, not to contact her superiors, but to access the research database she'd compiled. We can't outrun them, she said, fingers flying across holographic interfaces, but we might convince them. My research contains thousands of data points proving emotions enhance cognitive function in specific contexts. If I can present irrefutable evidence before the extraction team arrives. Marcus watched her work with growing hope. A scientific defense of emotion? Will your superiors even consider it? Celestials revere data above all else, Lyra explained. With sufficient evidence, they must acknowledge my findings, regardless of their preconceptions. They worked frantically through the afternoon, compiling research, cross-referencing neurological data, preparing Lyra's defense. As night fell, the laboratory's sensors detected an approaching craft. "They're here," Lyra whispered. The air shimmered as three tall figures materialized, celestials in retrieval armor, their expressions impassive. "Researcher Lyra, you are declared contaminated," the leader announced. "You will return for immediate recalibration." Lyra stepped forward, her stance protective of Marcus. "I invoke the right of scientific appeal. My research proves emotional experiences enhance cognitive function under specific parameters." Appeal denied, the leader responded coldly. "Your judgment is compromised. Then you violate our most sacred principle, that empirical evidence supersedes all preconception," Lyra challenged. "Review my data before dismissing it." When the leader moved toward Lyra, Marcus intervened, placing himself between them. "She has rights under our treaty. As Earth's representative, I demand you honor the diplomatic protocols." The retrieval leader paused, then raised a device toward Marcus. "Human interference will be neutralized." "No!" Lyra shouted, moving with unprecedented speed to deflect the device. A pulse of energy discharged, sending her crashing into the laboratory equipment. Marcus rushed to her side as the other Celestials restrained their leader. "Attacking a subject species violates Protocol Alpha," one reminded the leader. As Marcus cradled Lyra, her skin flickered between colors, stabilizing with effort. "My final evidence," she whispered to him, "is this moment. I chose to risk myself for another, the ultimate demonstration that emotion doesn't weaken rational thought, but gives it purpose." The observing Celestials, witnessing this exchange, began recording data of their own. The Celestial High Council chamber hummed with energy as displays projected Lyra's research findings. 3 months had passed since the extraction attempt, 3 months of rigorous debate and unprecedented scientific inquiry. Lyra stood before the council, her iridescent skin glowing with steady confidence. Beside her stood Marcus, the first human ever permitted to address celestial leadership directly. "The data is conclusive," Lyra stated, her voice resonating through the chamber. "Emotions do not merely serve as evolutionary remnants but as sophisticated information processing systems. What we dismissed as inefficiency actually allows for cognitive leaps impossible through pure logic." The chief science officer's expression remained skeptical. "Your research suggests our species abandoned a valuable evolutionary pathway prematurely." "Not abandoned," Lyra corrected. "Suppressed. The capacity remains dormant within our neurophysiology, as my own experience demonstrates." Marcus stepped forward, surprisingly comfortable before these alien beings who had nearly separated him from Lyra forever. "On Earth, we have a concept called multiple intelligences. Emotional intelligence complements analytical intelligence, they aren't opposing forces." Murmurs passed through the council as they reviewed Marcus's brain scans, taken during various emotional states. The neural complexity displayed challenged centuries of celestial understanding. "Your proposal for a permanent cultural exchange program is unprecedented," the council leader finally stated. "You suggest Celestials should voluntarily experience emotions?" "Under controlled scientific conditions," Lyra clarified. "With proper preparation and guidance from human partners. The potential benefits to both species are incalculable." After deliberation, the council reached its decision. The cultural exchange program would proceed, with Lyra appointed as its director. She and Marcus would lead the first cohort of celestial researchers in exploring the full spectrum of conscious experience, emotional and logical combined. Later, in the privacy of their quarters aboard the mothership, Lyra and Marcus celebrated this victory in a very human way. Their bodies entwined, her iridescent skin glowing with colors that reflected her emotional state without need for translation. "Your species was wrong about another thing," Marcus whispered against her neck, tracing the patterns that appeared on her skin wherever he touched. "What's that?" Lyra asked, experiencing pleasure that defied scientific categorization. "That physical intimacy is merely reproductive biology. This connection between us transcends physiology." Lyra's 3 hearts beat in a rhythm that matched his single human heart. "The physical manifestation of emotional bonding," she agreed, pulling him closer. "A hypothesis worth extensive exploration." Their laughter mingled, hers still new and slightly hesitant, his warm and encouraging. In that sound lay the future of interspecies understanding, a bridge built not through cold diplomacy but through the most powerful force in any universe, the capacity to recognize oneself in the other. As dawn broke over Earth, visible through the viewport of their quarters, Lyra updated her research log one final time. Final conclusion: love is not the enemy of reason but its most perfect expression, the recognition that connection enhances rather than diminishes individual potential. What my people once feared as contamination may be the missing element in our evolution. In loving this human, I have become not less celestial, but more completely conscious. End transmission. She closed the log and turned to Marcus, no longer a research subject but her partner in the greatest scientific advancement her civilization had ever known, the rediscovery of their capacity to feel.